Thank you all for being here. I'm delighted about this debate, which is about talent, and all BB Trust story has been about talent. All our future will be about talent and how to help and support young talents. So I think it's very important what will come out from this debate, for which I would like to thank Martijn Sanders, the moderator, Colin Curry, John Gilhooly, Paul Mosley, Sonia Simenauer, and Tom Service. Thank you for being here, and I'm sure that all what will come out from this debate will be extremely important for our trust first, but also for all us being here today. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists. We'll start with the start of the BB Trust, which is Mitsuko. Please watch the screen.
Is talent enough? And my conclusion is no. But depending on, of course, what talent means, and let me define what, within my language, the talent is. For a musician, first of all, that innate, strong, deeply rooted urgency to have to express one's deep emotions through music and nothing else. If you wanted to write a poetry or paint, then you are not a musician. So that music is innately most important, and that you want to express yourself. That is the point number one. And point number two, for me, is a certain amount of intellectual ability. Without it, you can't handle music from Johann Sebastian to, well, Pierre Boulez, for example. So it would be a good thing to have. Not only a good thing to have, I would call it a necessity. The third issue that everybody would have thought of is a technical ability. And that is becoming even more pronounced these days, but it was always so. So, and I would add the fourth item, which I never thought in the olden days that was part of talent, but even charisma. And that's part of the talent. But having said so, except for the item number one, all the next three points that I made can be acquired. Technique and even charisma through real understanding of music and conviction. Charisma comes with it. So those are so to think that talent is something that you're born with is wrong, I think. Now, so what is then needed on top of it? And there are two items only that I want to talk about. One is character. Without character, a person, whether the person is a musician, a painter, a politician, you do need character. And the character is something that makes out of a child prodigy a real musician. Otherwise, the person doesn't grow. And the character is the main point, that there is some moral center to the person. So that is possibly even more important than the other points I made. And then the most difficult at the end, that is, you must be lucky. And that is something that you can't just decide to get. So anyway, those are the things. And from my point of view, that is basically it. But what everybody is going to discuss about is the changing world, the technology that changed everything in the 20th century, and then the society that changed with the different technology and all of that, and the record companies are not the same anymore, and financial problems, the banks being completely loony, etc. No, that doesn't concern me. I can't. I have nothing to add to that, but I can. That everybody can discuss about those problems, and iPod downloading instead of buying CDs. I don't know what, and people not wanting to go to concerts, but not many people really wanting to listen to the classical music. That is the problem from the people's lives. You start listening to music at home, and then you do listen to beautiful music at school. And if those two don't exist, how are people going to hear music? And classical music is also, as talent, part of the talent is acquired. It is an acquired taste. But one point I want to make, because I am the only practicing musician among the panel, I think. So therefore, I want to have pointed out that although we have to be able to make a living, that is very important. Most of us, including myself, don't come from a rich family where their parents can send you to Eton. That sort of a thing is not on with most of us. So therefore, we have to be able to make our living. But having said so, to be a musician is not a profession, it's a vocation. And that is something that one must not forget. And I would be doing this even if people didn't want to pay me. So it is a privilege to be a musician. So therefore, but on the other hand, how to make people's lives possible in this musical world with so many musicians coming out of the conservatoires and all, and particularly the most talented ones, for them to survive. We were trying to, the Borletti-Buitoni Trust has tried to help these people. So anyway, so that's what I wanted to say. So I said, to be a musician is a privilege. And that is the only thing that at least I want to do. And thank you very much. And everybody can argue about everything else. Thank you.
Well, I think basically we don't need the panel anymore. Mitsuko has answered all the questions, right? I think we should start with a vote. First with the panel. Is talent enough? Who says yes?
Sorry?
I'm asking you the question, which is the motto of this panel. Is talent enough?
No.
No.
So, no. Who says yes? In the audience. Who says yes to the question, is talent enough?
I think you need a talent to use your talent.
Okay, let's go
That's
into
the next. That's the discussion.
Okay, good. We've established that the vast majority says that talent is not enough. So let's have a look at all the other factors which help shape a career. And let's start with the musician on the panel. What are the two, I would almost say. Colin, go ahead.
Well, I think it's important to, Mitsuko touched on this, what exactly is talent? What does it mean? Because it's a very broad, generic word. And I feel that talent is something that people can have or not. But I feel that the most important thing as a musician or artist is to be inspired. And if you are lucky enough to come into contact with interesting music and people who have magical qualities that can bring things out of people, then I think those moments can override, in fact, almost the need for innate talent.
Give us an example from your own career.
Well, I think for myself, I was someone who was very interested in playing the drums from an early age. I mean,
Jazz?
Yeah, jazz and pop. I was aged 2 or less when I first held the drumsticks. But for me, it was...
My grandson is 9 months, he already holds them.
Oh, well, I should watch my back. Is he talented? But at that level, it was just something that it was a bit of a laugh. And I don't think I was particularly gifted at this. It was just something that I enjoyed, and it was something that was fun. However, in my early teens, I encountered 2 incredible teachers. First of all, a wonderful piano teacher. Now, again, no false modesty necessary. I was a pretty abysmal pianist, not a talented pianist at all. I couldn't sight read. It took me a long time to learn the pieces. But this teacher inspired me beyond words. And at the same time, I had a very, very good percussion teacher who worked at me very slowly on technique. So I went in there and I was very gung-ho, but she slowed me right down, and it was more than 1 year before I actually even started to do even a role.
So you're basically saying that your talent has been created, maybe not, but helped along by the people that you met in
Well,
the
yeah,
very early days of your education.
I'm saying that very much, and I'm also saying that furthermore, the word, is talent enough, and maybe another title for debate would be what is talent?
Yes, but that's another debate, possibly.
Yeah.
John, I know at the Wigmore Hall you do a lot about looking for talent. For example, you organize competitions. From your point of view, when are you really excited about a young artist? What are you looking at? What is your role in shaping that career, seen from the point of view of a presenter?
Well, I think it's important to remember that we're all work in progress, and young artists in particular are work in progress. So, looking very carefully at when the debut recital should be, because as a promoter, you could get very excited about somebody, but you could do great damage if you award that debut recital a little bit too soon, a year or two too soon. Because there was a time when the Times in particular had a section for debut recitals, and Hilary Finch talks about this. That's gone. So if you appear at the Wigmore Hall, even if it's your debut recital, it's going to be compared with what else is going on in London that night, or what went on the night before, the night after. Everything now is on the same level, and so it has to be good. And the audience wants you to do well. But if you have a disaster, it takes a little while to recover. Right. So working with the agent and working with the artist.
You frame your concerts in certain contexts. For example,
absolutely.
You have a lunchtime concert, which is different from
an evening and a coffee concert. But there's still an expectation. There's still an expectation from the public that it will be of a certain quality. Right. And look at the song recital, for instance. Yeah. A young 25-year-old singer preparing 20, maybe 24 songs for a full evening recital they're completely exposed. It's not like being in the opera, where they have the director and the cast around them, and the props and all that sort of thing. They're there with a pianist. They have to show us that they understand the text, that they've delved deeply into the poetry, and that sometimes they're singing songs that we as an audience know very well, that they show us something of themselves, possibly a vulnerability, and that they show us something new, and maybe across 3 or 4 different languages in an evening. It's quite a tall order, and even some great opera singers fail on the recital platform. So bringing on a young singer is very important. Or if you meet a young string quartet and they often turn up and they say, I'd like to play, or we'd like to play some late Beethoven, you have to say no. Or if a young singer says, I'd like to sing Winterreise, you say no, let's look at something else. So that's those conversations, and a healthy relationship with the artist and with the agent in building towards the debut and how you go beyond the debut. The strategy for the next 2 or 3 years is very important.
But before they come to Wigmore Hall, of course, the artists have been to other places. They've been nurtured very much, I think, Sonja, your job, right?
Yes, although I will take an artist already at a certain stage of...
after or before Wigmore?
Well, we'll talk about it. Sometimes before. Yeah,
that's really,
before
what's
the
really
Wigmore
interesting, because...
No, but John belongs...
What triggers you to
take an
engage
artist?
that artist?
It is a question I'm being asked many, many times, and I don't know. There is something that tells me here is something that is different. And it's not because it is such a stupendous technique or someone most beautiful or something like this, but there is maybe the urge of this artist to say something. A little bit what Mitsuko said before. Yeah.
The motivation, the drive.
I have to do that. It's the must of my life. It's not I want to make a career, but I want to play music. Yeah. And there is a big difference between the two of them.
Yeah. Give us an example of in your career, in your experience, of a young artist or string quartet that you were really excited about, and why, at a very early stage of their career?
Well, there are 2 quartets that I would like to mention because I've taken them very, very early. It's the Artemis Quartet and the Quatuor Rebène, who's on stage now. There are quite a few others. Where I had the feeling, having worked for many old quartets, because I've been brought up by the older ones, that something was there.
Yeah, represented for many, many years at least my favorite quartet in the world, the Alban Berg
Quartet. And the Guarneris and the Tokyos and all of them. But they were my teachers, and I have learned from them how to look at the quartet, what the quartet needs, etc. But then I was facing these younger quartets coming up, wanting something different, having a different background, and trying to bring this background into the quartet, into the sacrosanct quartet world, and to figure out, does it have a space, and to accept, to look at what they brought as something that they also would teach me. It's not like only the older ones would teach.
Oh, yeah.
And
so it's a two-way thing. I mean,
it's really a two-way thing. Yeah. And to see what I would like to add to what Mitsuko said, a part of the intellectuality, a part of the honesty, etc. It's the question of time and of discipline.
Yeah. And especially for string quartets. Huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, the string quartet brings with the form that it will take more time than a young soloist.
Yeah.
Because by the time people hear about a string quartet, you can be sure that the quartet has existed already 5 years at least. And by the time it is being more known, it's been 10 years. I mean, when we speak about a quatuor band, they are 15 years old. And they look like kids. And they will remain kids.
So, the recording industry, there's a lot of talk about it. And we should focus on it a little bit this morning as well. It used to be very much the role of the recording companies to bring, for example, young quartets, young people into the foreground and giving them the exposure that you are able, with your marketing efforts, to give them. Has that changed? Is that still so, or is it different now?
Well, the recording industry has changed. The major labels used to dominate, and they still do in terms of market share, but they don't do in terms of activity of what's going on in terms of bringing up new artists. And there are many, many labels doing wonderful things, whether they're small labels, self-owned labels, where people get their work recorded and get it disseminated. The major labels, who still have a role, I believe, obviously, as I represent one, I don't know whether every artist feels that the major label is an essential thing, but it still seems to me the major labels have a big role to play. When we market, we do still spend a lot of money, and it is about getting the artist known to the widest number of people, and we can still do that. I have spent the last few years at Decca trying to sign some new talent. It's a bit like, I suppose people say, getting a record contract with a major label is getting like going through the eye of a needle. The things I guess you have, the boxes you have to tick apart from being very talented, there has to be an element of promotability. There has to be a hunger. There has to be what we call a standout potential, something that makes you different from the rest of the crowd, because it's extremely difficult for all of us to pick that thing out. And there has to be good management. But at the end of the day, I still find myself signing artists because they speak to my heart first, and I sometimes have to remind myself what the criteria are that a major label must go for. So, people in the major labels are still passionate. They still come into this business because they love it. And we are still trying to do quality work, even though it looks as though we also have a great eye on the commercial all the time.
Yeah. Again, it would be nice to have a recent example of who did you sign?
Exactly.
Why, and how are you going to shape the recording career?
Yeah, I suppose one example I would give is Benjamin Grosvenor, because he is not necessarily what you'd say is the obvious sort of image-led musician. He's won this competition or was finalist in the BBC Young Musician at the age of 11, and then sensibly he was managed slowly by a UK agent until he was 18. His playing, to me, stands out. I can tell when I hear him play, this is really different. He illuminates a phrase, or he thinks about playing something in a way that I find uniquely distinctive and difficult to find with a lot of the other technicians who, frankly, can. There are so many who can play all the notes, I think, more than ever before. It's so hard, what Kovacevic has sort of slightly demeaningly referred to as the typewriters. They're brilliant technicians. But with him, we're trying to look long-term. I know that whatever he does, he will bring something fresh. And I want people, when they have a new record from Benjamin, to think, oh, what's he going to do next? What's he going to surprise us with? Is it a new theme? Is it a new concept? Is it a new way of playing an old war horse? And I think in him we've found something like that.
Thank you very much. And finally, the role of the media in this respect. You think you have an obligation to young artists?
Yeah,
if I allow you to speak for all of the media together.
Of course. Well, I naturally represent a whole host of print and broadcast. Look, I think in the media there are all sorts of competing kind of backstage issues. I think there is a responsibility, absolutely, to promote young artists and to search them out. Now, if Adam Gatehouse is in the audience, he's responsible for Radio 3's New Generations artists. He's also on the artistic committee of the Borletti-Buitoni Trust. That's a really good example of a broadcast network doing more than just putting out concerts of great music, but actually nurturing the careers and management, effectively, of young artists and really doing something for their career. Slightly schizophrenically, if I think about the print media, I write for The Guardian, but I think a lot of these things are in common for other print and online media outlets, however we want to call them. On one hand, your editors will think, well, look, we can only write about someone if they're famous or if they've already got a career. Whereas I would want to say as a journalist and a classical music journalist, well, look, there's this amazing person, what we should be writing about him or her or this quartet, but actually that story is difficult to get past the sort of editorial things that happen at the Guardian specifically, and the same is going to be true for other papers. So I think sometimes in the print media, if you like, or that's the wrong term, isn't it, in newspapers and that, it's you face a kind of battle between wanting to represent, and in a way having a duty to represent what's new and what's newest and most interesting and what isn't promoted. After all, the interesting stories to tell are the ones that haven't been told before, not writing again about Lang Lang or whoever it is. But the difficulty is that you're sometimes it's as if somebody needs to be of a sufficient fame and have already had the kinds of things about promotability and all that stuff before you're going to write about them. So I think in a way it's a sort of double-edged that we face double-edged pressures. But I think it's probably easy. I mean, one of the other things that's happened in terms of the space, if you look at just the print side of things, there is much less space now in what you may have noticed in the newspapers you buy, not what you look at online, because there's much more there than everywhere else. But there's less space now for classical music. I mean, you mentioned John, the debut, where everybody's debut recital at the Wigmore Hall would get covered. It doesn't happen now. There are many fewer things reviewed. There are many fewer features written. So that's a kind of difficult situation. And the danger with that is you only write about the people who are already famous, which is absolutely not what we should be doing.
Yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
Yeah.
Sonia.
He just said something very important. There is this problem. You can make a career with someone who's known, but it's very difficult to make a career with someone who's unknown, because basically apart from people like John, who will have a dedication to the new generation, and of course Adam has made a big job out of it, yeah. There are only few organizers who will take the risk. They all want to have ready-made careers because they want the public, they need the public.
So you think, this goes to my heart, you think the presenters are not fulfilling the role they should?
I'm not saying the presenters.
Very generally.
I'm not saying the presenters. I think that there should be a more a better consciousness of how the thing should be a circle. Who should be working with whom to make it happen? It's not the promoters and the record companies and everybody in his role, but it's all coming together.
It's a structure.
It's a structure.
The system. So how would you like to change the system? Just let's do this morning.
Okay.
Let's fix it.
Well, I think one big problem of the system today is that we're working at the whole world at once. and everybody should be at the same time in every place of the world. If we would have a little bit more time to build up around cities, in countries, and then go to the next country and build up there, it would make it more solid and more viable also for the artist to jump from one continent to the other.
It's the old idea, huh? Rubinstein went to a city, let's say Buenos Aires. He played his first concert for a half-full hall, and the second concert 3 days after for a sold-out hall, and he would stay until the hall was half full again, and would move on to the next city. Well, that's how you see it?
No, that's not how I see it. Not really, but I would like to have more circles working in key places like the Wigmore Hall, giving a first stage, a second stage, until it gives the residency. 10 years you have to wait with John to get a residency for an artist.
John, what do you say? You agree with Sonia?
Absolutely.
That's too bad.
I think we have.
At least we agree.
I think we're in a privileged position at Wigmore Hall because we have 425 concerts a year. There is pressure in other halls, even in Vienna. Yeah. They're doing 40 or 50 recitals a year in both main halls. So, and in the States, they might have, at Carnegie Hall, I think there are 6 slots now for song recitals, 8 slots for string quartets. So they don't have the same luxury or the ability to build the careers in the way that we have. So I can see why it's difficult for presenters. And I think most presenters do their best. Through the European Concert Halls organisation, which you chaired, that presenters share intelligence and information about up-and-coming young artists, and that each director in their own territory is almost like a talent scout, and that if we spot somebody who's not quite ready but is exciting, that we pass the word along to the other promoters in Europe and in the States and elsewhere, and that network, whilst informal, is very valuable.
And it's actually quite formal in the sense that we instituted the Rising Stars
indeed,
series, where we would send the most promising artists from our own country around to the member halls of ECHO, and under our name. So it would say, in my case, the Concertgebouw presents Christiane Stotijn, who was one of those artists very early in her career. And that way she all of a sudden was able to perform in Vienna, in New York, and in London, and in Paris, and in Birmingham, and so on.
And some of them have made it to a world career.
Absolutely.
This is a fantastic network.
The question is always, would they also have made that career without that push that we gave them?
Well, there are good examples now of people existing outside of all these networks that you guys are involved in, like Valentin Lisitsa, for example, who's got 50, 60 million people watching her play Rachmaninoff online, sold out the Royal Albert Hall, and is now signed up, got her, and guess what? Her major record company got interested once she got 50 million hits on YouTube and sold out the Royal Albert Hall. So, there are people who...
That was me.
Well, exactly. Well, exactly. Yeah, but the point is, you were only interested once she'd sold out the Albert Hall and once she got that many hits. And the point being, there are artists who exist outside of all the networks that you all exist in, who are doing things on their own now. And I think that one of the issues around that is that, the whole thing about is talent enough? It's not only self-evident, is it not? Unless you are the kind of personality who is going to acquiesce often to the demands of either promoters or agents, you're going to find it very difficult. And I know that people are working very hard with people, very sensitively, and all that stuff, but fundamentally, there are things where I think there are examples of people who are extremely talented who aren't picked up because they aren't promotable in the terms that Paul's talking about.
What do you think the record companies think is promotable?
Well, it's fairly obvious, isn't it? It's what looks good on the tin and what you can sell.
I wanted to hear you say it.
Yeah, well, it's true. It's all the obvious stuff, I'm afraid. And Sorry, I'm slightly ranting for no particularly good reason. But I just want to say that one of the responsibilities is going to be to look around the ways that musicians themselves are getting themselves out there. So the other key thing I just want to say is that there are kinds of musicians who the whole implicit in this whole question is talent enough. Is talent enough for a major career? Well, why is that the most important thing? I mean, if a major career is going to be, not everyone wants a big record label. Not everyone wants to be playing Carnegie, all that stuff. Some people just want to be musicians. I mean, if Mitsuko Uchida is serious when she says she'd play for herself, that ought to be the most important thing too. I mean, it's as if, is talent enough? It's as if the only index to read whether someone's successful is if they have a successful career, if they're playing the Wigmore Hall, if they have a good record company, if they're doing all that stuff. Well, that might not be true. I mean, or are we just talking about that? Are we only talking about is talent enough to make the conventional careers that we're all responsible for promoting?
No, is talent enough to fulfill the potential of the artist, I would say. And sometimes that potential is the Royal Albert Hall, and sometimes it is your own study.
Well, in that case, talent is enough, isn't it? Because, well, anyway.
Well, the question
is...
But
let's go back, because I love that, to what you said about the recording industry and jumping on people just because they're selling tickets and hits on the internet.
We shouldn't be holier than thou about image. I mean, we all watch talent competitions in our own countries. We're a visual nation and we're a visual world. That will not change, and it's pointless to try and deny that the way somebody looks and the way they present themselves is not a major part of our world. It's more so than ever, and it will remain so. So I'm not going to deny that. But at the same time, there are uniquely talented artists who have a hint of genius. I mean, I signed a Cuban pianist called Jorge Luis Prats, who is certainly not a great looker. He smokes, drinks, and he's well overweight, and he plays fistfuls of wrong notes. But he has a personality and a character that I liked, and I thought there is something that stands out about him, and you can promote that. You don't have to promote a good-looking artist, although if they're great, that's fine too. But I think Tom's point about is talent enough for what is crucial. He's absolutely right. I mean, a lot of artists don't want to be on a major label. I think it does come down to money and luck, though, because it's all very well. I mean, Mitsuko can say, "Well, I would have played for nothing." But there are others for whom that's not an option. I mean, the whole point about doing music, it's always existed as there's the performance part and there's the industry part. At the end of the day, you've got to spend thousands of hours working at it, and if nobody's going to pay you for doing that, then you've got to have independent support. Or be very, very poor indeed. Yeah, and that's always been the case since Mozart and before. And we shouldn't hide from that. Money is important for aspiring young musicians.
Sure. Colin, so how did you achieve the status where you could live of your work? And that's basically this point, right? Because you told us about your start, now of your career, how you developed your talents. So how did you first present that talent to the public? And who helped you with that? And how did that result in your career?
Well,
apart from being very good looking on the CD sleeve, of course.
You're trying to make up for Mitsuko's comment about being the only practicing musician. Well, I would say I'm asked this question quite a lot. I perform about maybe almost half my work is in North America, where I made a very early debut. And when I'm there, there's a lot of percussionists follow my work. So I turn up, and even in rehearsals, there's sometimes dozens of just percussionists there.
But how did they know about you?
Well, this is present day, so I'm going to.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. So that happened very gradually. But what I would say is that they often have a similar question for me, the one you just gave. How did you manage this? Yeah. It's very also unusual being a solo percussionist playing with all these orchestras week in, week out. And one of the first things I say is that, well, I actually feel. And this is honesty rather than trying to butter anyone up who may or may not be here. But I say I actually feel quite lucky to come from the United Kingdom, where there are infrastructures in place that are quite visible on the global market for classical music. And these things would be the BBC, the Young Musician of the Year, BBC Proms, and the Borletti-Buitoni Trust has a centre here. All the publishing houses have offices here. So for someone playing new music, that's very important. So I think there's many things in place. If you're someone who does show signs of talent in the UK, there's fantastic systems here for supporting you and getting you visible. And that's precisely how I made my debut in the US at that early stage. And so I can now say that my debut in that territory was 15, 16 years ago. And that's why now I'm at the situation where there's this very big following for what I'm doing there.
Okay. I don't need to look at my watch because I have the big band over there. And it tells me that within 5 minutes we turn to the audience. But just one more question to the panel, and very short answers, please. If talent is not enough, and this is your vote, you said yes to that, talent is not enough. Which is the major factor that affects the career of the artist? I just go, Paul?
It's all those things that for which you don't really need talent. I think it's persistence and the ability to listen and to learn and to change what you are doing on the basis of listening and learning, but never give up. Persistence in all its forms.
So we have persistence.
Hard work.
Persistence as well.
I guess so, but also in the sense of just putting the hours in and being very able to absorb as many terms of reference as possible to give you a broad view of art and thought and expressivity.
The intellectual factor that Mitsuko mentioned.
Very important.
Very important. Sonia?
A complete dedication and give that the foremost priority together with an enormous discipline.
Sacrifice everything else.
Almost.
Yes.
Yes, it's that sense of vocation that Mitsuko talked about, that integrity, because audiences can see through the false musician, and that's what keeps a career going.
Is that so? You can't fool the audience?
I don't think you can, no. And Andras Schiff started playing at the Hall in 1978. He had 80 people for his first recital. He had 100 people for his second recital. Word went out, it grew. Now there's this massive following. That happens to great musicians, regardless of networks or not.
But that's also persistence on the
part of dedication and vocation.
Also the part of the presenter. Because
it
how
is,
many
yes.
presenters would say, after 80 people, in my hall, I'm going to present
But if you
again.
really, as a presenter, if you really believe in something, and if you see that spark, and if you see that sense of vocation in the musician or in the ensembles,
yes,
you will want to back them. You'll want to keep with them.
That's a great responsibility in your job.
Indeed, yeah.
Absolutely.
I'll go along with the integrity. I'd also say the ability and the necessity of saying no.
To what?
To opportunities which seem like the golden whatever and actually aren't. And having the discipline and self-knowledge, especially when you're young, to say, no, that isn't what I want to do, despite the riches that seem to be offered, is extremely important.
Okay.
At whatever stage.
Can I add just a little thing, because we're talking all the time about what the artist has to deliver.
Yes.
But I think that we all on the other side are asked to carry a big responsibility to help them carry this load.
Yeah. I think that's what John also mentioned. Okay, good. Thanks a lot, dear panel. Now it's up to you. I thought, go ahead.
My name is Robert von Baar, and I'm head of Bliss Records in Sweden. And I must say that I have a little bit of a hard time to sit down and still when I hear Mr. Service saying what he says about the recording companies. They are not all the same, you know.
Of course, absolutely. And I was.
There are companies actually who thrive by dosing up artists and composers, for that matter. Nobody has said a word about composers here yet. And try to give them the first chance. This is what I like so immensely about the Borletti-Buitoni Trust, because they are doing just that, and the New Generation program at BBC. But we also at BIS, we actually do try to do precisely that before they are known, sniff them out, and we have been singularly lucky in that respect. We sniffed out Christian Lindberg before he was anything, Martin Fröst, Vadim Gutzman, etc. I can go on, and we should not make a catalogari after this. But to say that all the companies only go for looks, talents in this respect of saleability is not correct.
No. I didn't mean that. No, I didn't mean that. I was talking about for a specific instance.
The honor word of this is actually choice. The choice to give people a chance to reject or love. You can't do that unless they are being heard. And being heard on records is one of the better ways to be heard in this country, in this world, anyway, so far. And so I just want to make a flaming protest.
But, you know, it's nice to have you here. But what is the... Let me ask you a question. You record an artist who is totally unknown yet, a debut.
That's what we do.
Yeah, that's what...
Until they get known.
Yeah, okay.
Then they are picked up by the majors.
Ah, okay.
But that's usual.
Maybe that's what I was talking about. I was talking about major records. But Robert, that's what I was talking about. The difference between major and
gentlemen, how many CDs do you expect to sell of a young cellist who's doing a recital CD for you?
Maybe about 1,500, the first one.
Wow.
We have a worldwide distribution, so we get rid of the first one.
Yes. And is that viable for you? I mean, is that commercially viable?
No. Absolutely not.
No, I understand.
And we have a duty as record companies, I think, to support the musical industry in this way. And unless we do it, who will?
But Paul, would you?
Well, first of all, I paid tribute. I mean, Robert von Baar is one of the great independent record companies who runs, and I have the highest regard for what he does. But I would also say that a major record company also loses money on its investment because its overheads are higher, it spends more money on marketing, and I also see, just in a slightly different way, our duty to bring on, maybe at a slightly different level of investment and sales requirement. We also lose money in the initial period and sometimes forever on our new investments. And you could say, well, why do you do it? Well, if you just have a catalogue of old dead people, it will die. As Peter Allwood, I remember once memory said, you have to feed the beast. And as many companies, you've seen one or two companies who no longer invest in new talent, their catalogue dies too. You have to reinvigorate that catalogue. And that might sound old-fashioned, but people still want to hear and talk about the stars that are coming up. And it is our duty, it's a cultural imperative of the major labels to do this, as well as the great independents like Robert.
Would you like to comment?
No, I absolutely agree with you 100%, of course. And I should have prefaced all I needed to say was the adjective major labels, as opposed to the incredible work that Bis does and Hyperion, Chandos, and all the great independent labels who are the lifeblood of what the record industry is, and who are doing more to support young artists than the major labels at the moment, and doing as much with the broadcast partners like Radio 3 are too. I mean, I think it's important. I work for Radio 3, but it's really important to put that in the same category, I think, as well.
Can I just say, I think that the major label independent thing is a little bit old hat, actually. I mean, there are hardly any major labels left anyway, and the ones that are still going are actually mainly peopled by people who care about the music just as much as the independents. And this major label, independent label thing it's blurred. We produce a very small amount of the amount. You look on Gramophone every month, there is a huge, thriving independent sector. 20 or 30 years ago, it was Decca EMI, Deutsche Grammophon, Philips, and one or two other independents. Now it's an incredible choice, self-publishing labels, all sorts of things. And I think this major independent thing is a bit old as an argument, actually.
I thought Sonia also wanted to say something.
No.
Oh,
no, this time not.
Okay, go ahead. Yes.
So glad I came to this event. A very strange time of the day, but I've seen Mitchery in concert quite a few times. I'm actually going to bring something to the debate. I'm not pretending to be anybody important, but I do go to other types of events, not just about classical music, and I do see correspondences between some of the things which were brought up today. One of the things which actually hasn't come up yet, which I think is crucial, and it was actually on television yesterday because Elizabeth Carston was a guest on Breakfast, and she was talking about the underrepresentation of women. And it's interesting to see the panel, only one woman. That's my first observation, because talent...
Well, let me address that immediately. Yeah. Were you at the panel yesterday evening?
No.
3 women.
Okay, I take that back. But what I'm saying is it is a problem, because she was talking about cinema and film and the fact that there's a lot of women, talented women, who are not given the exposure. But maybe it's not quite the same in classical music, but that's just one observation. I actually went to an event at the London Transport Museum a few weeks ago to do with posters. And there was a panellist there, and one of the things he said was, and I don't think he was necessarily representative, he works within London Transport, but this thing about you need to be known, he basically said that. And this actually goes against the original philosophy of Frank Pick, who actually was encouraging unknowns to do art and work for posters for London Transport. It was a big deal for ups and aspiring artists or designers. And if you could get a commission for London Transport London Transport or the Royal Mail, you achieved something special because it gave you a huge exposure. So this thing about needing to be known, I think, is very detrimental to talent, because basically, I'm glad the guy from BIS mentions this, and I think Tom Service, who I've listened to on the radio a lot, I totally agree with everything you said, Tom. And I think that the problem is the arbiters of taste, the people who actually are in position, whether it's Wigmore Hall or other organisations. And if you go to the BFR, you'll see there's a little article on their display by this guy called Tony Garnett, and he's talking about the BBC and the fact that there is a kind of conspiracy almost in terms of the people who actually commission programmes. You don't get the talent in the past like you did in the past. So whether it's classical music or whether it's television, basically the problem is who are the people who are actually the arbiters of taste, because the public rely on the companies to choose these musicians, and if they promote those ones, you're going to often get the least or the less talented people getting the exposure, and a lot of talented people don't get the opportunity.
Interesting point. Thank you very much. Sonia?
Can I answer just very quickly? Well, first of all, to the question of women, I think this we can leave out right away, because if there is a branch in which the women have a big space today, it's the music. Lots of violinists, of cellists, there is no. I wouldn't
have mentioned it if I'd gone last night.
No, it's not about the panel. It's just about the artist, and we have an enormous amount of young ladies going out. It changes along the time. Maybe when they get children, it might get difficult. But in the whole, we have a lot of women out there. And from what you said, to be known, I think we experience a world of parallel worlds in arts as well, in the drawing arts, then in the music. You have the global ones touring the whole world, and you have the ones that do the arts but don't need the names. There is a big society of artists, very talented artists, who work together and don't have a public, or don't have and such a big public of the press, etc., but are still very, very busy. I can see that in Berlin, where there is an enormous amount of musicians and other artists, and they do somehow live on it. It's not the same level of living, but it is also a very, very busy world of art. So there is both.
Yeah. I think the point was also made that you only get exposure when you're famous. So how do you get famous when there is no exposure?
Well,
would anybody comment on that?
I did.
Yes,
I think it's very important to underline the role of the public institutions. I mean, it was said that states have no money anymore and they cannot provide any support to culture, but this is completely wrong. Of course, a recording company, except some of them, they have to look at their accounts, they have shareholders, so they have to sell records. A hall has to be filled. And somehow this is an eye that who is running a hall has to think about. Critics are not so many anymore. A newspaper, they do not dedicate enough time because they don't have enough space for music, and this is true everywhere. But I think that what comes out at the end is that the role of public institutions and the state, what BBC did and what Radio 3, where is Adam there, was fantastic to support young talents and young artists. And I think this has a point which has to be raised. I recently have been asked to become Under-Secretary of Culture in Italy. And this is one point I have very clear in my mind, because I think that despite governments, states, public institutions have less and less funds, they should never, never forget that one of their major duties is to support young talents in the country. Also because the world has become so huge that otherwise these people, they will never make it. I was very surprised when at the Scala last year, Lang Lang, I'm sorry to go, with names, but somehow this has to be done, who is an artist I don't particularly like, had one entire week carte blanche. I mean, he could simply come, sit on the stage of the Scala, which, believe it or not, is regarded as one of the most important theatres in the world, and do whatever he wanted. Somehow I thought this was outrageous. This was really too much. So I met the superintendent and I said, come on, 1 week, carte blanche, Lang Lang, isn't that too much? And he said, no, because the hall was filled, completely packed. So this is a problem. And I think this is where a public institution, the television, the public television, or the public radio, or the state itself, has to find the money. And people have to ask for this to be done. Because this is a public duty which cannot be given up, in my opinion.
And that is something that the BBC is doing, not only for performers, of course, but for composers as well. I mean, Radio 3 is the biggest commissioner of new music in the country. I mean, there is, in a sense, an arbitration of taste going on, because there are people at the BBC who are deciding who needs to be, to take composition, who is commissioned and what they're commissioned for. That's always going to happen at some level, probably. But without that, and without that support, then those things wouldn't happen at all. And there's the Here and Now programme, the new music programme, for an hour and a half every Saturday, where absolutely that newest and most experimental and things are happening and being represented. And without that being there, then it wouldn't be there. You see what I mean? And that's absolutely a responsibility.
Adam, would you care to comment on the role of BBC? Would you deny all the flattery that's coming your way, or?
I don't think it's probably for me to comment on the role of the BBC, but all I would say is that in the 22 years that I've been working there and working with young artists, the thing that maybe more than any other I've noticed as a change, and it's something that hasn't yet been mentioned, is the willingness to diversify among young artists. That no longer is it enough just to have a solo career going around the major halls once you get established, particularly if it's established by a record company, that all the young artists, and I must say, contrary to what some people have been saying, I think there is an incredible, thriving community of wonderful young artists, more than ever today. I'm extremely positive about that whole scene. But the thing that, for me, stands them out from, let's say, artists of 30, 40 years ago, is their willingness to diversify, to go to different sorts of venues, to work in different sorts of combinations, groups. It's no longer a violinist just playing the concertos, but they will play trios, quartets. You see, it's a much more thriving thing, and I think that way they get their visibility. Because visibility, whatever, is a very important factor. You won't get your 10-year residency unless you've had a certain visibility. But somebody like Alina Ibragimova, for instance, she has been around on the public platform less than 10 years, but she had a residency at Wigmore, probably because she established a certain sort of visibility which made you willing to take that risk.
And a certain quality. And it's not just about those that are in front of us. There are always 30 or 40 musicians on what I would call a watch list. There are lots of visible young musicians, but there are lots of musicians that nobody knows about, that Adam has on his list, that I have on my list, that Sonia is looking at, that we're keeping an eye on for the appropriate moment, and that we're helping and mentoring behind the scenes. And that goes on constantly.
We would all love to see that list, John. Can't you disclose it on the internet or something like that? We might help you. No, he doesn't want to share it with us, I'm afraid. So, yeah.
I would like to raise just one matter that has not been raised until now. It's the repertoire. It's the changing repertoire. there is more space for Baroque music today than there was 20 years ago. There is more space for jazz music, etc.
And what about contemporary music?
And the contemporary music, but the contemporary music today is completely different than the one in the 80s. It sounds different. The composers have a different approach to the public, etc. And this all is also part of the game, and also part of what you say, that the artists are diversifying, because they may bring also their own energies and their own taste to the scene, because they go now in nightclubs and play classical music and jazz, or rock. We had the Quatuor Band yesterday.
The genres are merging. The genres are less separated
it's
than
merging,
they used to be. Yeah.
And they're more flexible, and it is not against the rule to be also in jeans. Yeah. It's not as straight as it used to be, like 25 years ago. Yeah. An artist had to be one picture.
Yes.
The one I worry about are not the young ones, because they have a public. There is an enormous public for young artists. The ones I worry about are the ones between 35 and 55. And those are the ones that
How old are you, Colin? What's your age?
Worryingly, I'm 36, so I'm just...
But you're out of there. You're already up there. But who has not made it at the top?
I would love to hear Colin's comment on yours. And not just because of your age. No, but for example, the role of contemporary music.
Well, I play only contemporary music.
Yes.
A very early work for me would be something from the 1990s. And I think...
There is not much before.
There are some. But in any case, this is my business, and it's my responsibility. In fact, we're looking at this, I'm probably one of the soloists who plays the most new music in the world right now, and I take that very seriously, and my thing is to diversify the repertoire. You're talking about diversification. So I am able, fortunately, to have a wide range of tastes in music, and I try and find the most interesting and fascinating composers to work with.
Do you know how many world premieres you were involved with in your career?
Well, I've now premiered more than 20 concertos.
Wow. Can you imagine?
But that may sound like a lot, but...
it does sound like a lot.
Well, fortunately, although that is quite a large quantity, the thing that I'm happiest about is in fact the quality of them, and nearly all of them, some of them of course are very recent, so we're still waiting, but I think maybe, honestly, maybe 18 of them have gone on to have long lives after the premiere, which is a crucial thing, and many of them have played dozens of times.
When we gave commissions at the Concertgebouw, I often asked the artist to be involved in the commission, because I thought that if the artist is passionate about the composer's work, that artist will not perform it just once at the world premiere and never again. It will continue its life. Is that...
Yeah.
Do you think it's a factor that you are a musician and a commissioner as well?
It's your responsibility to do pieces that you will want to play more than once.
Yes.
So that's why every piece I play, really, I'm seldom less than thrilled with what I have, because we're very careful about who I go to, and I work closely with these composers. And when I play these pieces...
You tell them what to write?
Not at all. I mean, that process is as varied as the characters involved. And some composers do ask me to be very close with them as they write these pieces. Others vanish, and the score comes onto the doormat.
Do you record all those commissions? How many of the 20 are recorded?
Almost none of them.
Well, that's a point. That's a major point.
Do you want to have coffee?
Well, what do you think?
I'm not saying... I don't think the major labels have got a great record on contemporary music. I mean, we have tried. I mean, with our label Argo, 15, 20 years ago, we had several composers under contract. It's commercially was very, very difficult, and it didn't continue for that many years. And that's a regret, and I don't have a solution to that particular issue of the composer. I wanted to pick up on something that Adam said about visibility. I mean, if visibility, as you say, is crucial, if that's the Rome, and there are many roads to Rome, and they're all difficult, but there's more than one way. For example, we've just happily just offered a first contract to a Borletti-Buitoni Trust artist, Lavinia Meyer, who plays fantastic, and she's also got such determination and energy and focus. But I can't get her a manager. None of the big agencies want to manage a harpist. They go, oh, well, we can't put a harpist. But it doesn't matter necessarily, because she's actually found another way. She went and made a record of Philip Glass. She went and found Philip Glass. She went and got, and she's had a huge success in Holland with this album. Yes. And we're hoping to do something that both has integrity, but cuts straight through to, should we say, more mass media. It is possible to do without always going through the slow route of artist management, especially if you pay an odd instrument. It's difficult for the managers, because obviously, how many places can you put a harpist on? But there's that route. There's obviously the route that Tom raised with someone like Valentina Lisitsa, who's obviously done it rather remarkably via social media. But she built that up over 12, 15 years. She didn't do that overnight. So there are different ways, and in social media, I mean, all these different things, Twitter and whatever, a lot of musicians don't want to know. Others are embracing them, and whatever it is, I mean, social media is media for the future. And the blendings of the different sort of music, the fact that some of these artists not just play in chamber music, but they also play with jazz musicians, they'll hang out in a club. That's very exciting, because it's all part of the fact that we consume music in a much more so-called iPod generation, where you might have a classical track followed by a world track and a jazz track, and it's all just good. Good music is the important thing.
Can I say,
I would like to,
just very briefly, just to slightly just agreeing with what Paul's saying, also saying that despite all what I said as a kind of lack of space within quote-unquote conventional media, there are, of course, a greater multiplicity of voices and people and space for writing and representing classical music than ever before, thanks to quote-unquote the internet and everything that's happening, and that is entirely to be welcomed. So just as artists are finding different ways of getting themselves out there, I mean, there's a whole generation of especially young writers, but not just young writers, who are continually writing about the things for which there's not space elsewhere, and thank God for that. It's all there. And there are a better generation of young writers about music, just as there are a better generation of young musicians, and that's entirely to be welcomed.
Okay. You have a question, and then yes, I would like go back to the panel and the audience with my last question of this morning, which is, what should change in order to help young talent? So the panel can think about that while we listen to your question.
I've got 3 points. The first one is talent enough? No. First and foremost, as Claudio Arau put it eloquently, you need a unique voice. That is the most important point. 2 other points that haven't been touched upon today, that I believe are uniquely important in today's media, are young artists need to be entrepreneurs. They need to find media such as YouTube, such as different mediums to get themselves known. I think being an entrepreneur in today's age is uniquely important, to get yourself known by labels, also to get you in front of the right people, also to get yourselves in front of the right audience that will expose you, as was put earlier. Andras Schiff started off at the Wigmore Hall with not many people, and through word of mouth he's become one of the most popular artists at the Wigmore Hall. And I should know, because I couldn't obtain tickets for his last concert playing Beethoven. It took me almost a month to get the tickets for that concert. So that's very important. The third point that hasn't been touched upon, that I think is most important when it comes to talent, is the responsibility of the conservatoires. Having been a student myself at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, one aspect that really wasn't looked at was psychology. There were many people there who were very talented and very good, but when you put them in front of an audience, they couldn't string 2 notes together. And
is that to do with the charisma that Mitsuko mentioned?
No, I think it's more than charisma. You can have a lot of charisma, but as similarly to a sportsman, who has sports psychologists. They need to be able to perform in front of an audience.
Yeah.
And that is exceptionally important. And there are many, many people at the Guildhall, and I also went to the Royal Academy as a junior, and even there were many, many people there that were very talented. They had all the right attributes to become successful musicians, but the mental aspect of dealing with an audience, dealing with the pressures of being put in front of the audience were not addressed.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think this is maybe the first point then on our list of the final stage of this discussion, which is the conservatoires have to pay more attention to the communication between the artist and the audience, and they have to learn about the psychology of that. Thank you very much. I would like to turn now to either the audience or the panel to add points or factors that would help young talent to emerge. Thank you very much. Who would like to comment? Also from the audience. There, go ahead.
Lucy Maxwell-Stewart, I'm an independent publicist. I come into contact with a lot of young artists as a result of something like BBT or competition winners, people who have the chance, got a little bit of visibility, but aren't ready for publicity. They're always anxious for the big managers, the big names, the big labels. I would like to see more instruction with people who are helping people on their career before they've got to a manager to find the right partners. It's not the name of the institution, it's the person in the institution. It doesn't have to be a big company, it has to be somebody that's passionate, and it's exactly what you said. You don't choose to work for an artist because of who they are or what their potential is. It's because you believe in them. And it's finding those people at that level to match to the right person, and I would like to see that. Maybe it's already happening, but I feel a lot of people going the wrong way, and it wastes 2-3 years of their life.
So you think there should be an organization, people that would help guide young artists to the right contacts?
BBT.
And that's what I was going to say. I think this is exactly what this trust is doing. But there should be more of that. Because we can only help, what is it, Ilaria, 6 or 7 people or groups per year, which already is a lot. It's fantastic. But there's certainly room for more, right? So, yeah.
Well, there is the help. There is the big help that the artists are experiencing with BBT in form of money. But there is also
more advice.
That's what I wanted to say. Yeah. There is more room for advice, and I think it is also our responsibility, the older managers, the older people, to keep time from the everyday life to talk with young artists. Even to tell them to do something else. Yeah. Sometimes they will, but sometimes they will be an artist because one told them to do something else.
There is a big dilemma in artist agencies, which is that the artists that need the most time in nurturing their career, but while they're not having a big career, are not bringing the income which compensates the artist manager for all the work that has to be done.
But for that matter, the older one bring the money. So take the money of the older one to give the time to the younger one. But you're basically subsidizing
the younger artists.
Of course you do.
You do.
And then they go to major companies.
Yeah. Okay, the gentleman from BIS.
Hello. We have been talking a lot here, haven't we, about how a young artist will stand out in the crowd. Mm-hmm. And I think that one way of doing that is actually to not how you play, but what you play. Like Colin says, if you have in a unique repertoire, that's a big step forward already. And I think that is something where not only the BBT Trust, but also the record companies can help the artist in creating new repertoire in that they commission it. I personally have commissioned more than 60 works, about 25 flute concertos for reasons that is obvious to anyone, and having been married to 2 flutists. But at least that is a...
That's another way to achieve success.
and that repertoire stays. And of course we have recorded most of it. And I think that it is a possible chance for an artist to actually make a way by also choosing which composers to turn to and actually doing more of the modern repertoire or the contemporary repertoire and creating, therefore, more music to be played.
Okay, we'll add that factor, thank you, to the list of how to nurture young talent. Who else has suggestions in that direction? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. My name's Charlotte House. I'm an artist manager. And I just wanted to say that one key thing from the perspective of the artist manager in nurturing young talent might be the capacity and willingness of other people in the classical music world to take risks. It's very easy to take a chance on the most promotable artists, this question of promotability. But the ones who are slightly less promotable, you need a lot more time, who are less well known, and it's going to take longer for them to become well known. We need people to be able to take risks on them. And as an artist manager, we can take a really big risk and spend years and hours of work. And we need other people to do that with us. And many people do, but not everybody.
But how, you're stating a fact, I believe, but how would you change it? How would you bring that about?
I guess it's working in partnership with people, building trusting partnerships, long-term relationships. But I don't really have the answer, which is why I'm asking the question.
Is there anybody here with the answer?
Time.
Time? Who said that?
Me.
Ah, okay.
Time. Build up, believe, time, talk with the people. You're not an artist manager within 5 years. After 30 years, maybe.
But I think what goes with time is also patience, and that's what you have to. Say that again, because I don't think everybody heard. To go with time, I think the key word that goes with that is patience, and you need to let young artists know as well. I mean, a lot of them know it, that you can't have everything all at once, and it's very important that we spend the time helping them to realise they have to be patient, and it isn't all going to come at once. But if we can help them maintain a consistent career that can grow and develop, then they can have a career for as long as they live.
I don't think that patience is a good word for artists. I think they need to be impatient, but they need to take the time. Yes. Be in a very big hurry and take your time.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I'm Jasper Bull of Danaccord Records, another Scandinavian record company piloting over here in England. We are often, as record companies, confronted with talented musicians who play wonderfully, and we would like to release their recordings. However, many musicians, I feel, need also to be able to use their talent of finding sponsors. Play for some people who have money, ask them for money, ask them to promote themselves. There are in the record industry now record labels, Onyx, Avi, just to mention a few of them, where artists pay themselves to get out on the market. They pay themselves for the marketing, for the advertisement, and that's another way of getting out. It is so much easier to work with an artist who is interested in promoting himself, who is interested in talking to journalists, who doesn't mind signing CDs after the concert, and who doesn't mind talking to audiences. These kind of artists does get much further than the artist who might be extremely talented, but who is unable to communicate with anyone. Just two little comments afterwards. I would love to have an artist like Lang Lang who can fill a concert hall every single day, and good for him. Mm-hmm. And finally, I think it's very important that when we do all these things here, we remember that the musicians are extremely sensible and sensitive people. So they need good managers, they need good people around them who will not exploit them, but who will help them. Robert in Biz helps them by doing a lot of contemporary music. We try to do it by letting them record a lot of unknown repertoire which has not been done before. So there are many ways of doing it, but mainly I think it's important for artists to know in the conservatories not how to play on the stage alone, but also how to get in contact with sponsors, managers, and to sell themselves.
Yeah, you agree? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Somebody's running with the
I know I'm being a bit greedy here, but it's just that it needs to be said. because I'm actually one of these people. I mean, it's quite off-putting sometimes. I mean, I'm actually trying to make a film later this year, and I'm doing a project, and I've got nothing, no money, but basically the idea is strong, and I'm hopeful. But the thing is, one of the things in terms of talent is not enough, because also the musician, or whatever art form that they're in, they almost need to be thick-skinned and not to be put off. And for those people who actually are talented, sometimes they are put off, and maybe they never get the opportunity to perform in public or to actually show what they can really do. And this is not just in classical music. I mean, I get rock magazines, and you see this a lot. Very talented people, you know, it may be particularly in the past. And then you've got the situation now where you've got people who are famous, and you're looking at them and thinking, what are they famous for? I mean, you know, basically, I'm not impressed. I'm not talking about classical, because classical is much more disciplined. But the thing is that for people who are talented, it's often the case that the people who succeed are just so single-minded that they will do whatever is necessary, and they will sell out halls and they will sign the CDs. Well, is that really what it's about? This is what Tom was saying in terms of the talented people who actually may not be given these commissions or may not have an opportunity because they actually probably have got a very unique voice, a very unique worldview, but they actually may not have what is necessary to do to achieve fame or to achieve exposure, which just means being not put off. And I actually, myself, I look for feedback. I look for a response, and if I don't get it, then it is off-putting, because basically you'll start to doubt yourself.
Okay, yeah? So, any more factors that we can offer to help young artists?
I think the managing of expectation, the word patience was brought up. You can't have everything at once, but also I think the schools, the colleges, have a responsibility to, at the appropriate moment, if a career isn't possible, to make that clear to the student or to the ensemble or whoever, because too often students graduate and they assume that they're going to have a career, and that's not going to be the case. And there are more and more music graduates coming out every year, and more being taken in here from all over the world. The standard is exceptionally high, and that's why it's more important that you have this unique voice, you have this integrity, you have that extra special thing that communicates with the audiences, and it's a tall order, as well as good physical and mental health, and all the other things that you need to sustain a long career. There's a whole multiplicity of things that you need just to begin and to keep going. And very often a career can start and it will implode and restart. So we forget sometimes the challenges that young musicians face, and that they're not always adequately prepared or guided at the right stages.
And panelists, would you advise your children to become musicians?
I would not advise anyone to become a musician. But if they really want to, we will have to accompany them.
I just want to say, I mean, about the BBT. I mean, as working for DECA, we know when we look at what you do at BBT as a guarantor of quality and integrity. I think what is being done by BBT is almost unique. That one of the things that I think would help if we could see more of is the twinning up of a great artist like Mitsuko with these aspiring musicians, because she actually helps where she can to give them opportunities to perform. Heiting was a big supporter of Christiana Stiltene, and I don't think she would have got the opportunities if it hadn't been for him. Ashkenazi is another great supporter of young musicians. I mean, very often they're one big break.
So it's mentoring.
Well, I think this mentoring, there is a big responsibility for the legends in our business to do more. I mean, some of them are fantastic and do great work. They can't all be great teachers, but they can do, I think, even more than they do to give the break. Where if it's a concerto where a conductor can pull in somebody that they really believe in, that the audience has never heard of, it's trying to make that gap between not being famous and nobody booking you. And that's one of the ways which can be done. And what BBT have shown, and also with the money they provide, I think the only other thing I would say is that the conservatories have a duty to provide a little bit more of a business-focused aspect to make it available for students. Obviously, it's not about business, but they've got to have those things available. I know Steve Johns, who was the EMI, is trying to do that at the Royal College of Music to try and give them some sense of what making a career could mean, the tough parts, as well as the hours of practice that go into it. They do need to know a little bit about the business side, and when they get the grants from the BBT, what sort of advice goes into how that money should be spent? I think I know Susan is an expert on this, but this money is very important money, and it may be the only money they see for a while. So it's absolutely crucial how that is it spent in the best way? Are you getting the best advice from whether it's record companies or business? I don't know.
Well, when they're first nominated and they go on a shortlist, they write us a statement about how they think they might like to spend the money. It's often a very interesting statement. Sometimes you realise they haven't got a clue. They know nothing about the business at all. Sometimes people are chosen because a particular group have come up with a really important idea that they need funding for. So everybody has a different story. We're very flexible and we're there to support them. Very often they're very naive about what you can achieve. It's I want to commission a new work, but they don't. So I say, what style of work? Why do you want to commission a new work? What is the point of it? What do you want to achieve? So we have all those sorts of conversations. It's a long term. We meet them the first time, and that's that first moment when they think, who are these people? And then we develop a dialogue. And it's not just about the money, it's about the people we can introduce them to. The standing in the street and saying, oh, I know somebody who wants this, meeting Robert Van Bar at an IAMA conference, which is the managers' conference. We happen to be showcasing a young bassoonist. Robert happened to be standing most conveniently and unintentionally, I'm sure, in the foyer of the King's Place. I happened to say to Robert, we've got this fantastic bassoonist and he's going to commission a new bassoon concerto. Robert said to me, I've got a fantastic composer, Sebastian Fagerlund, who wants to write concerti. So we got them together. He's now, the piece is commissioned, it's going to be performed by Lati, it's going to be performed by the Gothenburg Symphony, the BBC Symphony Orchestra have agreed to take it, and Robert most kindly is recording it. So it's those sort of unintentional, sometimes, connections that we make, and that develops. It takes time, we give them time, we introduce them to people. It's sort of mentoring, but we're initiators, we're collaborators. We help them find managers. It's a very broad spectrum. It's always different. The money is important, but it's not all that we do. And I think the other thing that we help with, Graham Johnson here, some people need profile films. Graham and our producer David Hoskins, they're very careful about how they put these things together. If you're at the concerts in the intervals, we're showing films of some of our artists who are newer artists who are not performing tonight. They go on YouTube. Our BBT channel on YouTube has now, since 2009, we set up our BBT YouTube channel. We've now had over 250,000 views on that channel for our artists. Bearing in mind, we're not a promoter and we're not managers. So Jürgen Van Ryan, trombonist, you can hear him this evening and this afternoon, a difficult instrument. Jürgen and his I Was Like Wow and the film that we made about Jürgen is one of the most popular viewed films that we have on YouTube. So somebody loves solo trombonists out there somewhere. So it's all those different things that you can use, and I suppose we nurture, we give them time, we make introductions, and also if we do something major like a commission or we introduce them to a record company in liaison with other partners, we have a PR person, Deborah Boriston, who's sitting here, who does her very best to make sure this very limited media space that's out there, that people know about it. So we don't spend lots of money on something where we haven't made an effort for the world at large to know about us.
Thanks a lot, Susan. That's very, very enlightening, I think. I think it's time. Time has flown, at least from my perspective. It's 12:30, yes. The Big Ben says so it should be true. I would very much like to thank our panelists. Big applause, please. Very much to thank Ilaria, Mitsuko, Susan for making this all possible. And we'll certainly see you at the masterclasses, the concert tonight, tomorrow, at this wonderful BBT weekend. Thank you very much.